We actually have a management forum, which is I believe 18 people in it now. And not everyone actually in there is a manager, but it's a learning forum. So every 2 weeks we will have a meeting and we'll talk about one of our management principles. So we actually have like a management principles guidebook, and it's just, these are the principles which we espouse. This is what it means to be a great manager and a great leader. So we spend a lot of time on stuff like that. And I think we do have a great leadership team as a result.
Welcome to Entrepreneurism. I'm your host, Scott Pollock, a seasoned business leader, entrepreneur, and CEO coach with a passion for helping others achieve success in their entrepreneurial journeys. On this show, we dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, uncovering why so many struggle and revealing what the most successful do differently. True entrepreneurs have unique superpowers, including the ability to spot hidden business opportunities and convert them into thriving ventures. For most mere mortals, this ability is absolutely unfathomable. But these same strengths can become sources of struggle, whether it's pursuing multiple opportunities without losing focus, scaling without eroding culture, or balancing short-term demands with long-term vision. The entrepreneur's journey is full of tensions. Here we explore critical factors that drive entrepreneurial success. How to stay focused, manage resources, build strong teams, and develop the resilience to navigate the ups and downs of the journey. Bold ideas, candid conversations, and insights that will help you unlock your full potential. Ready to learn and grow, expand your toolkit, and discover actionable strategies to help you navigate your own entrepreneurism? Let's dive in. Really excited to welcome on the podcast Morgan O'Hara, a passionate entrepreneur with a less than conventional path to business ownership. Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you so much for the invite, Scott. I'm also really excited to be here. This is a new experience for me.
Fantastic. So Morgan is managing partner of the Hutong, China's leader in cultural experiences and educational travel. He joined the Hutong 16 years ago, fresh out of earning his MBA at a time when he had limited experience, but lots of drive. Over the next several years, he was able to take on greater and greater responsibility in the business. And the original founders gave Morgan the opportunity to earn sweat equity based on performance. He also was able to reinvest some of his own earnings. And fast forward to today, Morgan is the business's largest shareholder. But enough of me summarizing his story. Let's dive into it. Morgan, perhaps you can start by telling us more about how you started your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, sure. I had no plans actually to come out to China. And as you mentioned, I got an MBA at a school called Cal Poly. I actually went to Cal Poly because I wanted to spend time in California. I'm from New York, but I applied to a bunch of schools and I got a scholarship there, a non-resident tuition waiver. So I decided to go out to Cal Poly, spent a year there. And the capstone of that program was a India trip. So we actually went to India and China.
Mhm.
And that was all put together by somebody who's actually became very much a mentor to me. This guy, the dean of our school, Chris Carr, who was very entrepreneurial at heart. And he had created this Chindia program from scratch.
Mhm.
And so we went to India. It was about 40 of us, all Californians and one international student and me from New York. And we went to India and then China. And it just, blew our minds. It was amazing. And Chris was also, he knew that at the time, it was very bad job market in the States. It was financial crisis, 2008, 2009. And it was like Olympics in China. There was so much opportunity it seemed like. And so actually at the end of that Chindia trip, on the second to last day, we visited a Hutong courtyard. And at that time, the Hutong courtyard had just opened up. It was founded by two Australians who later became my business partners, Mark and Stacy. And I just hit it off with them. And Chris introduced me. And long story short, I ended up staying in Beijing and over time convincing Mark and Stacy to let me work for them. Yeah, I mean, what appealed to me about the place was just the vibe. They were very friendly. It was a cool space. We did a fun cooking competition with my MBA group there, a fun Hutong scavenger hunt. And I thought, what a cool concept, what cool people. And I was also just desperate for opportunity. I didn't want to go back home and move in with my mom. So yeah, I stuck it out and managed to convince them to hire this MBA graduate who didn't have any business experience, but yeah, as you mentioned, who had a lot of drive.
Wow. And off you went. And what were you doing for them in those early days?
It was a bit of everything. We were 3 people, so that was Mark, Stacy, Sophia, and myself, and it was very much an event space, and Mark and Stacy are very, very creative, visionary types, but, essentially, they would bring in people from the community, they would host some private events, but it was very much kind of a laboratory, and I came in and tried to put structure on into things, and they're very unstructured. So we started thinking, okay, well, what sort of community events can we do? How can we reach out to more corporate clients? How can we start doing more work with schools? And I was able to convince some very talented people who were kind of on the fringes at the Hutong, who were somewhat involved. Maybe they worked some events, did some part-time work, to actually also join the team. So yeah, I would say one of the best decisions, or one of my biggest accomplishments, was being able to get also now a business partner in the Hutong, Josh Kernan, to join full time. He was working in Beijing for the Olympics, and convinced him to join the team full time. And we really also focused then on how can we grow the business, especially in terms of our kind of educational travel and schools business.
Yeah, talk a little bit, just for the listeners, about what the scope of the business has become. I mean, it started, I guess, it was events, and you had a space in Beijing, and for those who don't know, a hutong is this kind of courtyard, traditional courtyard home, going back to ancient times. So you started there, but then how has that evolved?
Yes, our company name is called the Hutong. It's not the most creative name, but it's because Mark and Stacy took over a Hutong courtyard. And Mark was always really into Chinese cuisine, Chinese culture, Chinese tea. He's a very entrepreneurial guy, travel around China in search of the best teas. So that was always a bit of a cornerstone of the courtyard, was to do cultural events, cooking classes, tea programs, so a cultural space. Stacy was more the creative spirit. She's an artist, and she would bring over lots of people to do just kind of creative, artistic workshops. So we had this community space where we would do community events, but we would also do private events. At the time, the kind of corporate events was also pretty big for us. So we did really fun cooking competitions. It wasn't really that scalable, but it was a big part of the business. So initially, I was quite focused on that, on how can we get more groups to come to the courtyard, what we do, which is going to create some buzz, and just make that a very happening space every day. The school programs was also a small part of our business, but we would get international schools to come to our courtyard to do programs kind of in and around our courtyard space, like dumpling making, hutong scavenger hunts, creative workshops. And then we got requests from 2 schools that we were working with, Beijing City International School and Harrow Beijing, to actually do trips farther afield. So the first trips we ran, I remember this was 300 students. At the time, we're like, oh my God, can we pull this off? We brought both of those schools in different weeks to do like a camping and leadership themed program out at the Great Wall in the northern hills of Beijing. And another trip we developed to Inner Mongolia. So looking at, of course, Mongolian culture and customs, but it also had very much kind of an environmental theme, looking at desertification issues in Inner Mongolia. And and we realized that we had the competencies to run great experiential learning programs, and we realized really this is where the opportunity is. And so I remember Josh and myself then were like, hey, let's get in the high speed train, let's go down to Shanghai, start talking with some schools in Shanghai. We got a contract with BIS Shanghai and with Shanghai. I'm like, okay, this is where it's at for us. So I mean, if you fast forward now, we have offices in Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and we've actually just opened up an office in Thailand. We'll be bringing close to 15,000 students, programs all over, mostly Greater China, but now Southeast Asia as well. And yeah, we're a 50-person organization. We don't do corporate stuff anymore. We really actually don't do that much stuff at the courtyard.
Hmm.
We still have the courtyard. We still bring groups there, but really we're an educational travel company these days. And that's what we do well. That's what we focus on. And that's kind of our bread and butter. And to give like a bit more of an idea. So all the international schools, so you all know this, Scott, but for the listeners, all the international schools in Asia, they'll all have a week within the school year where it's
Hmm.
get outside of the classroom, whether they call it challenge week, discovery week. And so we're a B2B business, and we work directly with schools to run their educational travel experiential learning programs and camps.
Yeah, absolutely. My daughter at the Shanghai American School, world classroom, and those kinds of programs are
Right.
fantastic. And
We
it
do we
really
do a number of programs for essays as well, and the micro campus program to Yunnan too. So yeah.
nice.
Mm.
That's fantastic. that gives us a picture of how the business has evolved. Now let's go back. So you go to work there and you're rolling up your sleeves, and this was really early days. It sounds like in the business as it was, which was finding itself and was basically offering whatever it could in order to to work with the community. How did the conversation start for you to start building some equity in this business?
Mhm. I've got a pretty bad memory, so I don't remember exactly how the conversation started. So this is sort of what I remember. Uh, Mark and Stacy really handed over the business to me to run. And like my initial role was marketing director and then became general manager. So I was really focused on creating structure in the business, growing the business.
Hmm.
We did have some informal conversations around me becoming a partner in the business. I didn't really push it that much. I don't remember exactly how long it took, but then for me, actually, there was an important target that we wanted to hit. At the time, I looked up to a lot of people in entrepreneurial organization in Beijing,
Hmm.
including Rich Robinson, who was also a bit of a mentor. I remember I would always ask Rich for advice, and he'd say, "Hey, why don't you just join Yo? And once you hit the $1 million threshold, you should join." And at the time, I also wasn't a partner, so I worked out a deal with Mark and Stacy to say, "All right, once we hit this $1 million threshold, then let's formalize things." And essentially that's what we did. We hit that target
Mm.
and we have this sort of parent company here in Hong Kong. And uh, I came up to 20% and 10% of which was sweat equity and then 10% of which was money, which essentially incentives that I had and some extra money, which I put back into the business to have some skin in the game.
Fantastic. By the way, Rich is great, and he's also been a guest on the show. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a small world, of course,
Mhm.
and Rich up in entrepreneur land in Beijing is a legend. So
Absolutely.
okay, so now you start to build equity and essentially become an after the fact founder. It sounds like you were driving a lot of the growth paths for the business, in any case, and where you were coming up with some of this vision for the business. Take a step back. Here we are 16 years later. The business is quite different, but you're working with international schools across the region, and it's a real business. I mean, this is it sounds like you say you're not working with corporates, and this is certainly not a big MNC kind of business, but it's a significant business, and with 50 people in it. What would you say has been, your I like to phrase it as an entrepreneurial superpower, but every entrepreneur brings themselves and the best of themselves to their business. What would you say that's been, and how have you leveraged it?
Yes, I can't say that I have any superpowers. There's a few things that come to mind, which I think I've done a good job of. And we are a well-run company and thank you for the kind words as well. But ultimately, I think it always boils down to two things for us. And these are two things which I always try to focus on. One is this idea and our mantra of creating a great place to work, learn, and grow.
Hmm.
And the second is it's in our mission statement is to provide exceptional cultural experiences in a fun learning environment. So
Hmm.
it doesn't matter. We always have different initiatives and targets and KPIs, but really just bringing the focus back to ultimately where, we spend most of our waking hours at work. And if we're not enjoying what we're doing, then we shouldn't be doing it. So creating a really positive company culture is something I spent a lot of time on. It's something I really care deeply about. I care deeply about everyone's experience of work with us, and we want to provide a positive, uplifting work environment. So that's something I've always focused on, and I think we do a good job of. And then, yeah, just externally, that it doesn't matter. It's a very busy industry, and we have lots of stuff going on. But ultimately, we're known for the quality of our programming and just really pushing that. So we're a very feedback driven organization. We do live by this mission of providing exceptional programs. And so just always bringing the focus back to that. I would say another thing which I'm really big on is just we have an internal saying, turning neggies into positives. So turning negative situations into positive ones.
Hmm.
So that's also just, every mistake that we make, let's look at it. Let's not feel bad about it, but let's turn it into a positive learning opportunity. So those are some of the things which come to mind, but certainly, yeah, a lot can be attributed not to myself, but to everyone on the team.
I love that. Well, I mean, I repeat all the time as a coach that in my mind, the head of any business has three accountabilities that they just can't delegate. And one of them is the vision and strategy. Another is to get the right people on the team. But the third is really the culture that's got to be owned by the head of the business. It sounds like you really you own that culture and you're very positive, which is also I think a trait of entrepreneurs in general. If you're not positive, there's too many roadblocks and too many challenges that you're not going to get through. You have to have the positivity, if not, and it's more than just optimism, I would say, but optimism is also part of that as well.
Yeah, and sometimes that can be a struggle. I remember initially as well, I mean, I cared so deeply, and I still do. But any setback we had, or when if I knew that somebody was struggling at work, it would really feel it in my gut, and like we have to fix this. I think over time, I have more faith that things are gonna work out. But yeah, I do really care a lot about this idea of just creating a really positive workplace and creating a really positive experience for all the students on our programs as well.
Fantastic. And this is clearly a purpose-driven organization, and I can hear it
It-
in the
It's
way
like a
you
bit of a call.
convey the message that purpose is really strong.
Yeah, I mean, we've taken, we have like our 6 company core values, which we're constantly coming back to, and we are a very values driven organization. Sometimes I kind of feel like we need to put the brake on things because, I feel like it's a bit too much, like, people are drinking them own Kool-Aid a bit too much internally. We had a members of our team got one of our core values tattooed on their ankle. I was like, oh God, this is going far. Uh, but yeah, she's still with us and it's a great core value. So
I love that. That's a great one. Well, that's living the values. And
living the best.
and
Yeah.
and when you can build an organization that really lives its values and that will keep people pushing in the right direction more so than just telling people what to do. So
Yeah.
that's so important. So talk a little bit about the struggles and the challenges that you have had. I mean, let's be specific. What would you say was your biggest struggle along this journey? It can be early on or it can be something a little bit later.
The biggest struggle without a doubt was the pandemic. Because for a business like ours, I mean,
Okay.
we couldn't go online. And looking back, I think no regrets for how we dealt with things. And we came out stronger, I would say, but it was obviously very tough. In 2020, we kind of had our head in the sand. We, of course, made some hard decisions, but we really tried to do right by our people, keep everyone employed as long as possible. And then just until that wasn't possible any longer. So,
Mm.
obviously dealing with all that, stop, start, hey, we think there's an opportunity here. No, everything's locked down. That was very tough to deal with. And as a leader as well, when you're trying to project a brave face and you're not sure whether you're going to make it through, obviously we're a very, people focused organization. So that was quite tough.
How, how
But
how did you make it through? I mean, clearly, all over the world, the pandemic created. I mean, it was this black swan event that created all kinds of challenges. In China, people know about the lockdowns. They don't know about some of the other kind of details. But how did you guys make it through?
So 2020, we lost a ton of money, about $1 million, and we eventually just came down to a core skeleton crew of just 6 core staff spread amongst Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. And then actually 2021, 2022, we were able to be profitable. And the main reason is because we were able to run programs in these pockets whenever the opportunity allowed. Hey, there were no lockdowns in Beijing. There were no cases. We could work with the schools in Beijing doing programming just in and around Beijing.
Mm,
Same in Shanghai. And Hong Kong, actually, that was the one silver lining for us because previously we worked with a lot of schools in Hong Kong. We would bring them up to China. And there were a number of established providers here in Hong Kong. But when you could run programming in Hong Kong, there was a big demand. There weren't enough providers or there weren't enough companies to run programs. We already had great relationships with the schools here. So, we had a few kind of old time, Hutongers, including myself, were like, well, we got to pay the bills. So we developed some pretty interesting programming in Hong Kong, which just kind of set us apart. And now, after the pandemic, we've really grown our market share here. So, but yeah, essentially, we were just whenever it was a bit like whack a mole, whenever there was opportunity to do some programs to make some money, we would do that. And that allowed us to get through. And then 2023, actually, then things really took off and we had the opposite problem. It's like, okay, everybody who's still around, come back full time. And now we can run travel programs. And, it was kind of burnout city because we were trying to just make up for those 3 years of lost business. But yeah, 2023 was a great year, a bit unsustainable. And now we've focused on really building the team back up and getting to where we feel we need to be.
Mm, okay. So, and it sounds like a lot of flexibility in those pandemic years was helpful. And how about you specifically as a leader? You know, eh, 16 years from freshly minted MBA to to head of a business with 50 people. Any struggles that you want to talk about and how you overcame those along the way as an entrepreneurial leader?
So I remember first joining EO. It was 2013, and just soaking up all of these learnings. I mean, there was the Vern Harnish. He came to Beijing, and there was the Rockefeller Habits Workshop or Scaling Up Workshop, and I was, trying to use all of these tools. And it was, such an intense period of actually growth for me, and I was so motivated at the time. Over time, I think I am a bit more of a steward of the company. I really focus on lifting other people up. Probably also because I'm getting old, I just have less drive. So that's definitely the evolution I've seen where, I'm more focused on just building the team up. And that's also reflected in our ownership structure now. Mark and Stacy actually moved back to Australia. So at that time, then I was the kind of active partner in the business. And then I also uh, helped or develop or work out a system where we now have three other partners in the business. And that feels really motivating to me and healthy as well. And that's kind of yeah, this the a system where I don't know how. I'm sorry, maybe I'm going off track a little bit, but
That's okay. That's okay.
yeah.
I mean, the notion of it sounds like you've had to find the right people to complement you and to complement your strengths. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, yeah. And I will also say, I think a pivotal moment was when I moved out to Hong Kong. Some of that was for personal reasons, having a family.
Hmm.
But I was no longer the source, as we like to say, in Beijing, where everybody would come to me because that's how it was initially. I remember like being on a program in Fujian, and then somebody's calling me because there's an event at the courtyard, and like, oh, what glasses are we going to use? And I also realized I was way too involved in all of the aspects of the business. Then moving down to Hong Kong, my role naturally changed. I would go up to Beijing once a month, but I've had more of a bird's eye view of things, and I just couldn't get involved in all the details.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a pretty common theme across all entrepreneurial ventures, which is that the founders at some time or actually at multiple points in their journey become the bottlenecks in their business. And then to be able to successfully scale beyond that, you really do need to be able to remove yourself. And that's a very, very common theme.
I think that idea of how to transform yourself as a leader doesn't come naturally. And I try to think probably now, it's interesting because a lot of the senior leaders in our company, they're more ambitious than I am. And so I think I've also just got to, I'm kind of thinking of, well, if we're going to get to be 100-person organization, it's going to be, a lot of work to get there. But hey, we've got a team that's really pushing it and they want to achieve that. So yeah, I think I just need to let them run with it.
Well, it's interesting because as the organization grows, right, and you have ambition to grow further, you need to surround yourself with the right people. And you talked about how much you care about those people. Talk a little bit about how are you hiring and developing the right leaders who will continue to protect, I would suggest, and to foster the culture that you have built, that you've been so caring about.
So we have a people experience team. It's like an HR team, but they are also really focused on the experience of work at the Hutong. Now, Yeah, I used to be a lot more involved in hiring. We use what we call a top grading methodology, which you might have heard of.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
familiar.
And we've kind of changed that, bastardized it a little bit to make it work for us. But I will say that idea of really taking the interview process very seriously, and more than anything, getting to know the person, doing a lot of reference checks and making sure there is the right value fit, it is very, very important for us. We have also, we tried one time to bring in somebody quite senior, who
Mhm.
had a lot of experience. And, we thought that they were just gonna, we were kind of in the woods, like clearing a path, and they were just gonna show us the runway. And that wasn't the case at all. So we are believers in building up talent within the organization, or not to say we wouldn't hire anyone senior in the future, but I think there's it's quite tough for somebody to come in, especially in an organization like ours, where we do have such a strong culture, and then lead from the get go.
Yeah.
We have a pretty, so we actually have a management forum, which is, we have 18 people in it now. And not everyone actually in there is a manager, but it's a learning forum. So every 2 weeks, we will have a meeting and we'll talk about one of our management principles. So we actually have like a management principles guidebook. And it's just, these are the principles which we espouse. This is what it means to be a great manager and a great leader. So we spend a lot of time on stuff like that. And I think we do have a great leadership team as a result.
That's awesome. I mean, just again for the listeners to punctuate a couple of those things. Top grading, I'm a huge believer in. Personally, I mean, that's top grading. The book is Brad Smart. I'm typically, or more often, I should say, recommending to my entrepreneur clients to read Brad's son's book, which is Who. It's Jeff Smart. Jeff Smart wrote that book, and I think I find it to be a little bit more simplified, if you will, but capturing the key principles of top grading, which are extremely useful. Starting with the understanding of what you want, the scorecard is
Mhm.
one of the key things that I bring to a lot of companies. Then, you also talked about how hiring someone senior and letting them run is not a panacea, which I think a lot of folks, particularly, I've had several clients and plenty of other friends who have wanted to step back in their business and said, "Okay, I'm just going to hire a general manager to run it." It can work, and when it does work, it's amazing, it's brilliant, but there's just so much that goes into doing it properly and getting the formula to work. So I really appreciate that. And finally, I just want to punctuate, you mentioned your management forum with, 18 of your folks learning and growing together. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's clearly the ethos of EO as well, which you talked about, but that's so critical. So I love all that, and I think that is a testament to the fabric that you've built in this business. So with that, I want to take a quick detour, and each time I have new guests on, I want to do some quick fire entrepreneurial hacks, ask you a few set questions. First one, what's one book every entrepreneur should read other than perhaps Top Grading? Although that's a very good one.
That's a very good one. No, for me, it has to be Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, which is now known as Scaling Up.
Scaling up.
I
Yeah,
remember, yeah, I read that book and I was like, why did I get an MBA? There's just much more value in this book. And, just then how you set up the rhythms within a business. It's so, so good.
yeah, absolutely. And that was the first certification I got when I decided I wanted to become a coach. So yeah, Scaling Up it's a textbook that has tons of golden nuggets in it. Agreed. What's one thing you do every morning to set yourself up for success?
I generally get up pretty early, between 5 and 5:30 in the morning, and, it's nothing too special, but I go down to the kitchen, I make a big pot of coffee, open my computer, and I plan my day. Or I'll usually get through 1 or 2 things, which I know are gonna require my focus, and I might not be able to get through later in the day. So, yeah, I love being at my computer alone in the morning before the family gets up.
Blocking your time in the morning to tackle a couple of those toads. I like that. What's a tool or app you can't live without?
We use Asana at the Hutong. It's like a project task management software tool. We
Mhm.
don't use it as well as we should, but I actually use it for a lot of personal things as well. It's like my personal calendar. So, I'll put reminders on there for my mom's birthday or my anniversary. So that's the tool I use, Asana.
Perfect. What's a daily habit that keeps you grounded?
So it's a it's almost a daily habit for me. Exercise is really important. So whether it's, I've got quite into running here in Hong Kong, swimming, biking, going to the gym. Yeah, it really does a lot for me.
And what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
It's something I've heard recently, which really stuck with me, and I wish I would have had it as a mantra earlier. But that is, nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems.
Mm,
Um, And, there's been times when I've gotten so stressed out about what I realize now are just, kind of insignificant things. And so, anyhow, now I know that whenever something goes not according to plan, it's going to be all right. But also a reminder that, hey, when we feel like we're at the top of the world, well, we're not at the top of the world, and we're gonna come down as well.
fantastic. I guess to close, I don't know if you can summarize into a piece of advice, but I think there's probably plenty of people out there who do love the business that they're working in, but perhaps haven't found yet a path to sort of rising up in that business the way you have. I'm not sure that it's I'm not suggesting, I should say, that it's the path for everybody or that it's even a possibility for everybody. But anything you could advise to young people who might be listening to this and saying, yeah, I did find a business that I really love, that you could suggest that they can do in order to try and maybe perhaps open up this kind of path for themselves.
Yeah, certainly. I don't think there's, a one size fits all, but the first thing I would say would be really to prove your worth and your value, make yourself indispensable. We've always had a principle at Hutong as well, friends before business. And so we've really valued relationships. So
Mm,
in my experience, actually then negotiating for more equity or actually bringing in new partners into the business, it's never been overly contentious. It's more been, hey, actually, yeah, you're amazing, and you want to commit your career to the Hutong, and we want to make that happen. So, like similarly, bringing in Josh as a business partner, we brought in our general manager Daisy as a business partner. She had a background at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and she took for a small business, we're managed so well in terms of our financial reporting, and I'm like, well, gosh, she's worth her weight in gold, right? And so, like, yeah, let's bring Daisy as a partner to the business. More recently, a younger manager, Brian Trout, was a Schwartzman scholar. He made himself so indispensable, and then we had those conversations. He let that be known, and we were open to it as well. Obviously, we have a structure where, and this is, also because I'm not the founder. I was bestowed equity into the business, and so I also want to pass that along as well, and
mm.
come up with a system where we're able to do that. But I think, yeah, it all starts with really just making yourself so important that the company couldn't stand losing you.
Perfect. Great note to end on. Really appreciate you joining the show today, Morgan. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
And to my listeners, we've got many more amazing guests lined up. Please subscribe, leave feedback, and share this episode in your feeds. Until next time. Thanks for listening. Remember, entrepreneurship isn't just about spotting opportunities. It's about taking disciplined action to bring them to life. Hope you'll join again next time as we continue to unpack the complexities of entrepreneurism.